A Vampire's Heart by David Wright. Charles Thorogood invited me over to talk about the vote. For some reason that I still couldn't comprehend, call it tradition if you like, we still couldn't enter someone's house unless we were invited. That's important. He invited me into his house. I don't mean to question your commitment, Henry, he began tentatively, turning to retrieve 2 cups of freshly brewed coffee from the kitchen counter, but changing the name is a step too far, don't you think? His back was fully turned to me when he said it, and that was his mistake. No mirrors in the kitchen. I lunged, wrapping my arms around his shoulders and my teeth around his neck. And that was my mistake. I could feel the bulge of muscles surge beneath his gray wool suit. Charles, for all his pious words, was a large man, well over 6 feet, and not averse to defending himself. He threw me off like a rag doll. Bewildered, but not noticeably alarmed, he wiped his neck and looked at the blood on his hand. "Have you lost your mind?" He stared at me, perplexed, as I leapt up from the polished linoleum floor, and then his eyes widened at the sight of my extended fangs. You're a bloody vampire!" His wound was superficial. It might not take. Sickness, death surely, but perhaps not a full conversion. The element of surprise was past, but I needed to do this, bulging muscles or not. A lot had changed since the first Nosferatu had infected the human race. Back then, the converted were powerful creatures, capable of ripping a grown man completely in half and consuming him whole. Or so I'd been told. But over the centuries, the blood had mutated, losing some characteristics like strength, but gaining others. My coven was less sensitive to light, allowing us to walk around in the daytime like normal people. So, in a way, less was more. I'm not sure changing into bats was ever a thing. I lunged, teeth first, and caught a powerful right cross for my efforts. My head was ringing. Charles had sustained another superficial wound to his knuckles, but didn't feel it. He was in full combat mode now, legs apart, massive fists outstretched and circling. What happened to turning the other cheek? "I don't care what you are," he raged. "You come into my house, you bite me on the neck, you are going down. And God forgive me." Just then, a security beep sounded, and the front door creaked open. "Hi, honey. Can you give me a hand with the—" Margaret appeared in the doorway, a bag of groceries in one hand and Mary's sweet little hand in the other. I'd known Margaret for 20 years, prayed with her at her dad's funeral, saw her daughter get baptized. But that was then, before my conversion. But that's another story. "No, Margaret, get back!" Those were his last words, his eyes darting to the door, just enough distraction for my fangs to find his throat, and this time sink deep. The exchange of fluids satiating my bloodlust and delivering a full dose of the neurotoxin at the same time. Charles' massive body crumbled to the kitchen floor. He was still conscious, but paralyzed, his eyes forced to watch as I finished off his wife and 10-year-old daughter. I was late to the board meeting, but it couldn't be helped. I needed to change and shower. There was no hiding my cut lip and black eye, but that couldn't be helped either. "You're late," Morris Thorogood stated the obvious. He was good at that. "And what happened to your face? You in a car accident or something?" Although they were brothers, Morris was the exact opposite of Charles in every way. Short, stupid, and spineless. I'd never converted him because, frankly, I'd never felt the need. I could always talk him into doing whatever I wanted him to do. No need to get messy. Yeah, something like that, I answered vaguely. They call the vote yet? No, Vanguard hasn't finished their proposal. Said they have a big surprise. Vote won't be until tomorrow. Good. Morris shook his bald head. What do you mean, good? You heard what my brother said last week, Henry. His voice carries a lot of weight at this school. It'll never pass. Morris was right. At the last board meeting, Charles had made a big impression. He spoke eloquently about the dangers of accepting help from a big corporation like Vanguard, a corporation that owned and operated, among other things, several large casinos across the state, and perhaps even a legal brothel. Need I remind you, my Christian brothers and sisters, Charles articulated boldly, Holy Cross Academy is a Christian school and must remain so despite the government's efforts to shut her down. He held up his large finger like the pious orators of old. Better she dies a martyr's death than fall to the corruption of Babylon. And with that, he killed my coven's best chance to infiltrate the school. But that was last week. A lot could change in a week. Where is he? Morris glanced around the gymnasium nervously. It's not like Charles to miss a meeting. Oh, how he loves his meetings. As if on cue, the gym doors creaked open, and a white-faced Charles Thorogood staggered in. If it pleases the council, he mumbled hoarsely, I'd like to say a few words. Here we go, Morris whispered to me over his shoulder. The board chair, an elderly Filipino gentleman with a bald spot, nodded reluctantly, and Charles approached the microphone. Brothers and sisters, I've had a change of heart. When I look at these hallowed walls draped with sports banners of years gone by, I can no longer bear the thought of a wrecking ball laying them low. There was an audible gasp in the room. Charles continued undaunted, pausing only to cough briefly and adjust the red scarf around his neck. I propose that we accept Vanguard's gracious offer to pay our property taxes and legal bills in exchange for certain advertising privileges. I also propose that we change the name of our school from the Holy Cross Academy to the Holy Heart Academy, thereby circumventing the state's ban on religious symbols in educational institutions. Another gasp. Morris's mouth was agape. Nothing will change except the name. Though hoarse, Charles's voice rose. The Lord's work will continue in this place as it has since I laid the first stone more than 20 years ago. As my wise father used to say just before the harvest rains, better to bend in the storm than break. His words were never more true than they are today. Vote for Vanguard and save our school. My coven owned Vanguard, and now Vanguard would own the school. Charles stepped back from the microphone, and the room erupted in applause. Morris turned in my direction. Well, that went better than expected. O ye of little faith, I smiled, being careful not to show my teeth. Sometimes the fangs took a little longer to retract, especially if I hadn't used them in a while. But still, changing the name. Morris grimaced. Not sure if my wife is going to like that, and she's on the board too. Oh? I queried. Unlike Morris, his wife, another Margaret, was formidable. She could make waves. Perhaps I could drop by tonight and have a few words with her, if that's okay with you. I can be quite persuasive given half a chance. Look what I did with your brother. Sure, I guess. He shrugged and glanced across the crowded gym to where his red-scarfed brother was shaking hands with each of the 8 board members, not including Margaret, who remained petulantly in her seat. I still can't believe it. My brother? Like he said, he had a change of heart. Yeah, but my brother? It happens sometimes. I reached up and patted him on the shoulder. The artery pulsed in his skinny neck. So, 8 o'clock sound okay? He shrugged again, snorting a nervous chuckle through his red nose. Morris, I flashed my most winning smile. Are you inviting me over to your house tonight or not? I need to hear you say it. He laughed. Yes, Henry, I'm inviting you over to my house. See you at 8. The End. A Vampire's Heart by David Wright.